Digital-only and video game streaming is the future of most games, whether your data caps or connection speeds are enough. Let's chat about it in the comments below, but first, my opinion. I'm Tarmack, and this is Feature Creep. At this stage, most of the major hardware producers and several unrelated ones have at the very least tried out the idea of video game streaming. We have dedicated game streaming options like Liquid Sky or Shadow, which let you set up virtual machines in the same way a company might with the Amazon cloud. We have GeForce Now, Nvidia's streaming rental service, PlayStation Now, and even a slight nod from Microsoft with a digital-only Xbox version coming. Though granted this is for local play and not streaming, it is at least in the same direction of removing retail games from the front, a move I find amusing given how much rage there was the last time they tried this. At this point, I think we can expect discs to disappear from Microsoft systems sooner than others, and unlike last time, the market will be largely okay with it. At GDC, Google announced the Stadia platform. Stadia is a kind of YouTube integration which lets gamers subject to zero patience at all click a link while watching a video of a game to begin playing the game in their browser within a target of 5 seconds. Stadia, of course, is no good without hardware of some kind and can function by way of most mobile devices like phones or tablets and be streamed to a TV via Chromecast. One of the most fascinating pieces of this news is the concept of the Google controller, which is a direct Wi-Fi device, so instead of pairing Bluetooth with your phone and dealing with the added latency of your phone's operating system, the controller connects to cloud servers directly. They're also talking a big game about how their client hardware, that being the stuff which you, the gamers, actually playing on many miles away, will in many cases be mounted near, or I suspect within the same facility as servers running many multiplayer games like Fortnite or Apex Legends. This does drop a big source of added latency that tends to show up when trying to stream games from the cloud. And quite frankly, between Google, Amazon AWS, and Microsoft Azure, the chances you don't have a distributed data center asset somewhere nearby are getting even lower as time goes on, dropping latency issues further and further. Microsoft will also be getting into the streaming game in a big way, or so says a leaked email Phil Spencer sent out to his team. Quote, "Google went big today and we have a couple of months until E3 when we will go big," end quote. Whether that leak was intentional or not is subject only to your imagination. Video game streaming doesn't excite everyone. Many of the most vocal gamers will often argue against it on the grounds of game ownership or possessiveness and control. In the past, I've been one of those because I like to own my games as well, and prevent companies from having the power to take them away from me. In fact, I very recently had to do a chargeback with Electronic Arts where I had the very real possibility that my somewhat squalid Origin library may get taken away from me in the process. Luckily for me, that doesn't appear to have happened yet. We will argue that games need to be preserved so that the next generation can enjoy the games we enjoyed. However, as time goes on, my suspicion is that this is merely a nostalgia trip for older gamers more than anything, at least the majority. GOG may have some excellent old games, and I bet that they have data on how many of those old games have not only been purchased but also downloaded and installed. My bet is that GOG is populated primarily by older gamers who buy games they played as kids, but either never download or only download and never play. The most vocal doesn't in any way mean a majority. While gamers like myself and others can argue until the cows come home to roost or the roosters go out to pasture or some such nonsense that gaming should remain pure and in the hands of the consumer, I think it's safe to say that this ship has sailed. Games as a service is alive and well, and gamers are speaking with their wallets on this already, much in favor. All of the boycotts don't work. A whole gaming generation has grown up with mobile over the last 8 years or so. They can vote now. They have credit cards. They never knew a world without games as a service, and this is all normal. Not to belabor the point too much, but it is worth drawing a clear distinction between what used to be good and what is currently perceived as good by the gamers who have known nothing else. It has its issues, to be sure. The latency of sending a command from your mouse or controller hundreds or thousands of miles away, having that command be crunched by a remote server which sends back a video stream of what your command did in a game is a big problem even still. As I've discussed a long time ago, some of this has to do with the last mile latency where fiber and copper meet. But it is also affected in a large way by how many transactional points exist between you and the server. So Google's method of having a dedicated Wi-Fi controller and positioning their client cloud operation and developer servers side by side is extremely interesting. But I started this piece by saying that digital and game streaming is the future of most games regardless of your data caps or connection speeds, so let's address that assertion. The game industry is beholden to the consumer in one primary way, that being sales of video games. Game revenue is skyrocketing, but retail revenue year over year is a mere fraction of the industry and dropping. In 2010, retail accounted for 69% of game revenue according to market research firm NPD, including all sales, subscriptions, microtransactions, and mobile. That number for 2017 was only 21%. So it's easy to see why Google positioned themselves in the way they did with Stadia, especially given how much of a focus there is on mobile integration for playing full-tier games. GameStop's stock price dropped to the lowest it's been in 14 years as a result of a large sell-off immediately after the Stadia announcement. They've been in trouble for a while now because of the reduced number of AAA titles being released every year as publishers strive to consolidate into a smaller number of bigger successes, and of course, the game market shift to digital. And if you've been into a GameStop lately, you know they're more a knick-knack shop than a game store these days. In fact, all of the big game retailers have been facing a similar trend, with store shelf space dropping as the years go on. We just don't hear about it because Walmart and Best Buy aren't in danger of going out of business if their video game section starts to do poorly. The crux of the discussion I wanted to have here, though, is that it may not matter that internet connection speeds, data caps, and latency issues exist because only the big city centers ultimately matter. For any business, there's a point where a particular product or service simply doesn't make sense to produce any longer. If GameStop goes out of business, do the clients move to buy at Walmart or Best Buy? If Best Buy sees too heavy a reduction in retail sales where they could replace the shelf space with other products that make more money, where then will you go, retail shoppers? Is everyone going to switch to buying boxed copies from Amazon or other online sources, or maybe test out that fancy Google, Sony, Nvidia, Microsoft streaming service? And will the publishers eventually make the decision to terminate retail products entirely in favor of full-blown digital download and cloud streaming only? One of the common arguments against video game streaming is that the internet connections around the world aren't good enough to support it. But if shelf space dries up, it quickly becomes not worthwhile for the publishers to go to the trouble of making boxed copies at all, reverting to those lovely cards with a code at the barest minimum. And when that happens, you, the gamer with a bad internet connection or a low data cap, is simply removed from the target market. You're no longer their concern because they've already crunched the numbers and the profit you generate wasn't enough to keep selling to you. The truth of the matter is that convenience trumps all things eventually. Netflix proved this for video, and as I've discussed here, video games dropping retail as a method of distribution is coming sooner than later. Oddly, Netflix has also commented that they lose more users to Fortnite than they do to HBO, so take that for what it's worth. It is true that internet connections aren't all equal, but fairness doesn't really exist in the corporate world. If you're too expensive to sell to, they will leave you in the dust. Though it is worth mentioning that even with the data cap issue many gamers have from the internet providers, streaming your actual usage most likely uses less data than downloading 70GB full installers that seem to be all the rage these days. We can complain all we want about how games should be owned, not rented, that our connections are poor, or that the latency of streaming isn't as good as the video card under our desks. At the end of the day, this issue is governed by basic economics, though, and if the retailers fail or decide their shelves are better filled with more profitable products, it's a really, really hard sell. Where do you stand on the digital-only front or the game streaming side of the industry? Given the amount of effort being put into it, I'm curious to hear your experiences with these services and your hopes for how all of this pans out. Let's chat about it down below. I'd also like to do an extremely late public service announcement. I'm very aware that the last video I put out was almost a year ago, and I should have commented on this before now, so I'm sorry for that. I was tapped to run a non-gaming related tech startup in May of last year, so basically I've been working 2 jobs since then. I miss the game industry immensely and making this content, but it was the kind of opportunity which, with any luck, would give me the freedom to be able to do what I want afterwards. It just requires investment of time for now. At the moment, we're still running in stealth mode, so I can't really talk about what I'm doing exactly, but when I can, I will. I appreciate the folks who have stuck around and am as genuine as I can be when I say I really miss doing this stuff. I will try to keep doing occasional pieces, but obviously can't guarantee it. See you on the flip side. My name's Tarmack. That's all I have to say.